Well, thank you, President Cannon. Yes, this is the third of this series that I have been the interviewer, the Larry King, so to speak. And today we have Rajeev Dhawan of the Georgia State Forecasting Center. Let me just read a couple points from his bio to give you a little bit of background on Rajeev, and then we'll go into the interview. He is the Zwerner Chair of Economic Forecasting and the director of the Economic Forecasting Center at the Robinson College of Business at Georgia State. He's over the years won several awards for his forecasting accuracy. He has been here in Atlanta since 2000. So a lot of his forecasting gives us a local perspective, the state and the Atlanta region, as well as the Southeast. In 2005, he was named the most accurate forecaster for GDP by Bloomberg News, so national recognition there. Locally, he serves as the chair of the advisory committee for regional growth for the Atlanta Regional Commission, and is also a member of the Georgia Governor's Council of Economic Advisors, which he's been since 2003. Before joining Georgia State in 2000, he was director of econometric forecasting at the Business Forecasting Project at the Anderson School of Business at UCLA. His education is a BA in economics with honors from St. Stephen's College in India, an MA in economics from the Delhi School of Economics in India, and he got his PhD in economics again from UCLA. As I said, he will provide a bit more of a local perspective than Raphael Bostic did a couple of weeks ago, but I do want to start with a little bit more of his national forecasting views. But before that, let me just start, Rajeev, and ask you to explain what the Forecasting Center does and how you do it. I view forecasters as brave people. So how do you do your heroic work?
Well, first I'll say that I'm delighted to be doing this forecast talk and very humbled that you are moderating it. It's very rare to have a former Fed president interviewing a forecaster. It's usually the other way around. So this is a unique opportunity. And you're right. I mean, I was thinking about whatever I do, people are always unhappy. If the forecast is right, they are unhappy because it could be not what they were looking for. If the forecast is wrong, they're going to be unhappy because you were wrong. And in this category, it's even your family members that will point out that you were wrong. So when I was starting in this business, my mentor, who's a Texan, he's deceased now, and this is about 25 years ago, he says to me, Rajeev, this is a business in which you only get brickbats, no bouquets. So if you're looking for niceness, don't be in it. He was trying to scare me away, but I didn't. And I've been here 25 years later. I've taken my share of brickbats, and they come, they go. They do leave a mark, but then you move on.
You are part of the Blue Chip survey. I'm sure many members of our audience are familiar with the Blue Chip survey. It's about 50 forecasters, prominent national forecasters, and then it becomes a reference itself when you take the median or the average of Blue Chip forecasters. In that group, where are you positioned today? Are you on the optimistic side or the pessimistic side? And again, this is looking at the national outlook.
The answer is, like a typical economist, I can have it both ways, but as a forecaster, I have to take a stand. So on paper, on average, my forecast is on the pessimistic side when you just go by the GDP growth for 2021. Okay, so the median is around 3.5 to 4. I'm at about 2.5. That looks very pessimistic. So I'm technically the most pessimistic forecaster in that panel of 50. And it's not by design, it's by happenstance. But here's the difference. in everybody's forecast, the reason they get to this 3.5%, 4% for this year is that they have a rip-roaring growth starting in the second quarter, 4 to 5%. And that's how we get over there. In my case, that growth is coming by late 2021, early 2022. Because to me, the vaccine is the light at the end of the tunnel, but it's not a magic thing that magically we will start interacting with each other come March, April. To me, it's going to take some time. It's going to take time for the vaccine to get disseminated with the people and then for the benefits to come. For example, are you or me planning to go to a conference in fall? The answer is so far, no. There are some brave people who are doing in-person meetings. So that's one way to look at it. So the big benefit comes when enough people get the vaccine so we can interact with each other. And the second thing is looking at statistics today in the Wall Street Journal. It was not very surprising that the number of mortgages in forbearance, they peaked at 8% last May. And since then, they were recovering down, but they have flattened out at 5.5%. That tells you, to me, that is recovery. When does this forbearance goes down to practically zero is when I would say the economy has fully recovered. In between, there will be spending by the government. The Fed will keep the interest rate zero forever. They keep on saying, we're not even thinking about raising rates. And I believe them that they will keep it low. So in between, whatever happens, the fluctuations that will happen will be because either the virus is controlling what's going on, or there will be some artificial stimulus, and we can talk more about that. So in that sense, my forecast may be very pessimistic, but I call it realistic because I look at the way I think the things will evolve, and then the economy will evolve with that. And this is the difference between me and the Wall Street type forecasting firms. Over there, I remember 20 plus years ago, I wanted to go to Wall Street, and I did go and talk to the people, and they basically said, look, you have to sing the tune the person who's paying your paycheck. It's either the equity desk or the bond desk. Figure out what you want to do. Whereas in the academia, my paycheck comes a fixed one from the university. There is no ups or downs, but of course, there are constraints. So I can be a little bit more brave, as I call it. I can take a little bit more of a contrarian stand. Of course, I can't be totally wrong all the time, or I can't be totally contrarian all the time. And that's the difference between a forecasting center and the forecasting firms and the other people they are. We all do the same job. We all have constraints. But my thinking is a little bit more about, I'm more focused on a little bit long-term. The short-term accuracy, which you get, the newspapers and the media channels are always talking about what's the latest estimate of the current quarter GDP growth, which is great. We do that. When I fill out the surveys every month for the blue chip, for the consensus in UK, for the German IFO, for the Wall Street Journal. I'm part of all the Federal Reserve Bank of Philadelphia's Livingston survey and all that. I have to fill out monthly what that number is. But my focus is more on like next 6 to 12 months to 3 years. That's what I call long term. And that profile matters. How the economy evolves, it matters. And economy is like a super tanker. It typically does not turn on a dime, except like when this biological event happened last year. But so the progression is a little bit slower. So that's kind of like my basic belief about how the economy will evolve in the next 2 years.
Do you buy the proposition that you have to sort of have a view on the evolution of the virus first before you can forecast how the economy is going to evolve over the coming months and into next year?
Absolutely. In one of my talks that I've titled it over the last 6 months, the main title was that this economic tango is being led by the virus. And we have seen that very clearly in the dramatic drop and then the dramatic recovery as the things opened up. You can see that in the data for different countries too. I just came back from a family trip to India, 30 plus hours on the plane with the mask and everything. And when you're sitting over there, you're quarantined at home over there, and you're watching the world news, you can see what was evolving. This UK variant was coming in when I just landed and I was in quarantine over there. And my journey return back was via London, which had to be canceled, and I had to buy a new ticket to come back via Paris. So my perspective was different. Whereas in the US, people were more focused on politics at that time, the Senate races and other stuff. So you can see in the world that Europe at this point is basically in a lockdown. All the three big economies over there, France, Germany, and UK. And you can see that when that one is closed, you can read the headline that people went to Dubai to party over there because they were open. Now you can hear about that Dubai is having a resurgence in virus, and it's beginning to show up in the other places too. Just yesterday, Taiwan just quarantined 5,000 people because there was a small cluster of viruses from a hospital. New Zealand had its first case of its domestic, what you call it, communal transmission of virus after 2 months. So this virus will control it. And what's going to happen 3 months from now? I don't know. I'm not an epidemiologist, but we all had to become one in a hurry last year. And one has to be kind of like, you can be very positive in your outlook, but you have to be realistic that this thing is being controlled by it, and monetary and fiscal policy can only put some Band-Aid onto this bleeding. It cannot change the direction of it.
Let's get into the implications then of this broad picture that you've painted for the state and local economy. And my first question, to provide some perspective to our audience, is how does Georgia and Atlanta align with national trends? Can we extrapolate from national trends to local effect, or are these economies, the local economy, the state economy, significantly different?
Well, that's a great question, because it brings into perspective what are the drivers for growth in the local economy. You know, if you go back 40 years ago, when Atlanta was much smaller, then small things that happened over here, like moving of the headquarters or something, were big economic impact things. Now, by the time you're here in 2020, we are a global economy. Atlanta is global. So what happens globally has an impact over here, especially on the headquarters, which are situated in the Atlanta metro area. So this is how much the boat gets tied to both national and global events. We have the biggest airport, we have one of the biggest airlines, and they are the biggest private employer in town. And look at their revenues. Delta's revenues are still down 75% plus. Their employment is down more than 25%. It has been kept a little bit high because of the CARES Act, first and second money. It tells you that when Delta will have to strategize to the reduced traffic in the world economy this year too, it's going to have implications in the local economy. That is why both the global trends become local. At the same time, we can engineer our own things, and you can see that in the real estate. That said, in terms of like how bad was the drop over here and the recovery, the drop in employment, which is the best metric to look at the local economy, metro economy or the state economy, it was not as bad as the national economy. National economy fell about 16%. Here it was only 10%. Recovery has been much faster. That said, the national economy is down 8%. We're only down 3%. Okay? That sounds good on paper. So we are doing better than the nation. But the trouble is, when it comes to those well-paying jobs in what I call the catalyst sectors, from where the growth starts, professional and business services, corporate side, information technology, manufacturing, transportation, those kind of sectors, the drop over here was exactly like the national economy, 10% in employment base. And the recovery is pretty much the same too. So when it comes to the what you call retail and hospitality jobs, where the biggest hit was, we have done better than the nation because we did not remain closed for that long, and we have remained open. If you compare it to California and New York, it is much better. But at the same time, that is not what creates the demand for all the office buildings and all the high-rise buildings that are planned in this town. In the last 1 year, I've been following the news. It's still the same old model. I'm going to build a 15-story high-rise with apartments and condos, or I'm going to build a 36-story tower. That thing has changed.
Let's dig in a little bit more deeply into the state and local economy, and just give me your quick feedback on some of the drivers, some of the elements. Let's say consumer demand. How is the consumer behaving in Georgia and in Atlanta?
Well, I would love to answer that, but I don't have the data for local retail sales or even states retail sales. All I have is what I see in the sales tax collection numbers. Okay. We have very detailed data for the national economy, what people spend money on. So to give you an example, a small category in the national income accounts of the GDP, from which GDP is calculated, is called spending on watches and jewelry. That component dropped 50%. It's a very small component. That dropped 50% in March and April last year, as expected. But then it recovered dramatically to be up by 20% now compared to what it was a year ago. And I was looking at the reasons. Who's buying all these watches and jewelry? And one answer is couples are caught up at home, and watches and jewelry is one way of bribing each other to maintain peace and harmony. Another economist friend of mine said, look, weddings got postponed. People saved the money on that. Parents said, okay, $30,000 not to be spent on the reception. Here's the money. Go buy some jewelry. Maybe that's what's going on. We don't know. Now, on the local economy, it's where I come in. I put it this way. I have this theory called the triangle of money. You look at the jobs. You look at the quality of the jobs first. You sometimes may have some very confusing signals over here. Then you go look at the income numbers, personal income and all that you have for the local economy. But the best metric that comes every month is the tax collections data at the state level. How much they collected in income taxes, sales tax, other kind of motor vehicle tax, other stuff. You can look at that. And then you should go to real estate. Don't do the direct thing. So confirm what you see in the jobs data with the income data, and then you go with it. And that is why, even if I don't have the retail sales over here by category, I know that people in March and April, just like the national economy, pulled back on buying stuff in the market. So you can see the sales tax collections falling 7% on a year-over-year basis. And now they're up 7% year-over-year basis because we are buying things online. And we're also buying, money is there, which means most of the white-collar jobs are still there. The income is still there. There were some cutbacks. And that tells you the health of the local economy to quite some extent. Then the other component is income tax collections. They dropped initially in March and April, but now they are up quite a bit. Actually, they're more than what the employment data suggests to you. And there's one simple reason for that. When you get unemployment insurance checks for, remember at one time there were 500,000 people collecting unemployment insurance payments over here, both the state and the national ones, and that program is still going on. You have to pay the 6% state tax on that. That added to the income tax coffers to the tune of almost $1 billion in the last 8-9 months.
Let's talk a little bit about real estate. Before I get there, there was an article that made me laugh a little bit last week on the subject of state tax collections, and it pointed out that hotel motel fees are down almost 30%, but tobacco tax collections are up 11%, and alcoholic beverage tax collections are up 13%. So that gives you an idea where people are spending their money. Let's talk about, maybe we can do this in sort of a lightning round, some of the aspects of the real estate picture. if restaurants fail, what happens? What happens to the city if we lose our food service and restaurant locations?
It is bad news for the cities for the traditional customer that likes to go out to a high-end steakhouse, sit down, do a business deal, and spend the money. That's what the model was in the last 40 years. But that model is changing now. The millennials are coming up and they want to eat, but they don't want to go out to eat. They want it delivered. So there's the concept of the ghost kitchens coming up. Food still will be made. The way it's delivered will be different. And the issue is, what makes a city? Is it the attractions, the restaurants and everything, or is it the other things? So it becomes an issue. And I think the move will be towards less in-person dining, much less than what people are thinking, and more about delivery, ghost kitchens, and it will be gourmet food too, but it will come from a no-name place. It will just be online, and the kitchen will be somewhere, and it will get delivered.
Will the housing boom continue? Will it outlast the crisis?
This is where I say sometimes my answers will make people unhappy. And this is one area where people get very, very upset. The more building you do, the less is the appreciation in the home prices for the existing owners. So when Atlanta went through this overbuilding boom between 2003 and 2007, just like the rest of the economy, we didn't have much home price appreciation. It was 3-4% at the most. Then we didn't build much after the crisis. The home price appreciation now is 4, 5, 6, and the latest one is 8%. So that's the part of it. On the other side is what type of building will happen. It will be more single family. It will be more outside of the core area. And that is where, because now it's become very clear that if I can live in Alpharetta and I only have to go to work once or twice a week, then I don't need to live in Midtown. Even the young kids are beginning to think about, maybe I need to go out a little bit further out, which was not the model, what was true till like February 2020. It was all about, I need to build something in town, in Midtown, Buckhead, Old Fourth Ward, raise a high building, big high-rise towers. That is changing. And the faster you adapt to this reality, the faster the real estate will come to it, and there will be less surprises.
Let's move on to a couple other categories. What do you think will happen to the office category?
I would put my money on, the way people are going, a low-rise building spread out so that people can either take an elevator with few people or just jog up the stairs, spread out. So it is like there is a food places nearby, a building, office building, and other things. Because idea to build a 36-story building with 500,000 square feet of space into a confined spot is not what people want. We have not even gone back to our offices in the high-rise buildings. So idea that they will come back in the future in the same spot is difficult. So I see projects coming out in outside of the metro area, like outside the core part, which is all this low slung building, which was Class B property in the old days. That's going to become Class A because that's what the people will be demanding.
Let me combine the category of industrial and retail with a kind of elaborate question. There's been a boom in industrial, particularly distribution centers and warehousing. That, to some extent, has served the online shopping phenomenon. So will online shopping continue to expand? Will it drive out retail? And will it support industrial?
It's easy to bet on online shopping. If people like me are buying stuff from Target online, that means it has arrived. I was one of the last holdouts of the online shopping for basic stuff. So people are going to do that. And it's very convenient. And if they are willing to subsidize to give it to you for nothing, shipping costs, there's no point going to a retail place. So even if you go to the retail place, there will be a distribution center, and that means more warehousing, more industrial space. More stuff is coming from abroad. So where Savannah Port is the jewel over here, and you look to it, the connecting to it is the rail lines, is the warehouses, they are growing. So retail place as such will have to morph into something else. And they're trying to figure out what's going to happen with the malls and everything that we seem to have it in oversupply right now.
We've got a couple minutes left. I'd like to pivot back to the national picture with a couple of macro questions to get your views. And the first relates to consumer price inflation. Are you worried about consumer price inflation? Do you think undesired inflation will follow the Fed's desired increase in the rate of growth of prices? And are we seeing potential for hyperinflation?
I am not worried about inflation. Let's take a counterfactual forecast to mind. Let's say by March, everybody is vaccinated. We all are going out and greeting each other. Every hotel is booked. Every airline is booked. Now you have a case of demand outstripping supply leading to inflation. If that happens, I will take that inflation anytime, and I'll say, let's move on. But that's not what's going to happen. It's going to come back to the normal slowly but surely, which means there is time for the supply chains to adjust and provide the goods that we need. So that's how inflation arises, when demand outstrips supply. I don't see that happening. So I'm not worried about hyperinflation. Yes, the debt is there, it's rising, okay? And the Fed has been the big buyer of that debt too, up to the tune of $120 billion a month these days, in one form or the other. And here's the thing. Last year, the savings rate went up because we were confined at home. We could not go out, travel, eat, do other things. We had the money. The corporations were not investing. They had the cash left over. That was able to support the debt that was floated last year. Can that happen this year? Probably not, because things are beginning to open up. So there will be pressure on interest rates, and that will show you. But I don't expect the interest rates to go from this 1.1% to 3%. I expect it to go slowly but surely to 2% by the early next year.
And you're talking about the 10-year Treasury,
10-year, which determines the mortgage rate and the other things. I don't expect the short-term rate, the Fed rate, to move at all for the next 3 years. That's what I call the long-term forecast. More than that is beyond my capabilities at this point. So there will be a nice spread. Banks will make money, but mortgage market, where people are thinking that 3% mortgage rates are going to become 2.5%, and we should build more, and people will buy more, they will be disappointed.
Let me ask one final question. We have no questions from the audience today, so I will then turn it back to President Cannon. But there's some possibility of a silver lining from the COVID period. Some economists, including economists with the last name Dhawan in Boston, are projecting a productivity spurt that comes out of learned behaviors in the COVID period. For example, the digitization move might be accelerated, and we just may become more productive. Do you agree with that? Do you see some silver lining that can come from this horrible period we've been through?
Well, I may be expected to agree with another Dhawan. Dhawan is as we pronounce in Hindi, but Dhawan is the American pronunciation. But productivity is a long-term thing. What you see 3, 5, 7 years down the road. That will definitely happen. We're discovering, like when internet came between 96 and 98, we're seeing the full effect of that 10 years later. And now we are seeing the Zoom and everything, another next level of productivity. So that will happen. The short term is, what I have in mind is, will the vaccines, which there's going to be multiple, and we're going to take them, will the vaccines turbocharge our spending on healthcare? Because we might decide that now we need to do something more. We need to take more care of our bodies. We need to do multiple other things. and the technology exists and is safe to go back. So you might have a spending spurt on healthcare. And why do I care about it? If 60% of the GDP is consumption, then about 25% of that consumption is healthcare spending, 2.5 trillion.
Yeah.
Healthcare spending is equivalent to all the spending you do on buying new cars, going out to restaurants, buying all the jewelry and watches, and you can put in a couple more other categories over here. That's how big that segment is. That segment dropped 40% in March and April. It has recovered. It's still 20% below the old level. If it goes another 20% above the old level, you can have much higher GDP growth. But remember, again, this is 2022 and later, not in 2021.
Okay. Well, this has been great, enlightening. I think I'm sure that my Rotary colleagues agree. They've learned a lot, and it's been a useful local perspective, particularly. Now, let me turn it back to President Cannon to conclude the show.
Well, and Rajeev, don't go away yet. I will say sometimes in this online world, we get a few questions, sometimes we don't. But we had very high numbers listening the whole time. So let me first say thank you. And you do an amazing job. And I've heard you before, predicting the future, but describing your assumptions, describing the data behind it. It's a very rich, robust discussion behind your forecast. So thank you for that.
Thank you for your compliment. It's one of the rare bouquets,
Well, and just out of curiosity, so, it does look like in your forecast, just one question here, probably in 57 parts, but, unemployment probably does stay elevated in your forecast. And there's a lot of talk about the K economy. What is kind of your outlook? What are there some sectors that really stay challenged as we get into 2022? And, a rough idea how difficult that could be.
Well, this is not a typical recession. As we saw it, the real estate boomed in this recession. Anything that had to do with trying to do social distancing or living in an isolated place has done very well. And that will keep on happening. The adjustment will come in the other parts of the real estate, especially on the multifamily housing and city versus outside the city. That will happen. In terms of jobs, when we economists, when we look at our data, we have the sectors like manufacturing, information, those sectors will grow. Those are what I call catalysts. The issue is about 25% of the economy is in hospitality, followed by retail, where there has been growth, especially in retail. When we hired all those people to deliver stuff at home, it shows up in the retail trade of employment. That 20%, 25% of the economy barely makes 15 to 20,000 a year, whereas one job in the corporate sector is easily 80,000 on average. So those are the people who will buy those single family homes. Those are the people who will be renting the office space. It is at that point what happens to the health, the revenue side of the company is going to determine what they can hire over here. And one lesson that they have learned is that what I'm also hearing in anecdotal evidence is that they're hiring computer programmers. Okay. They're keeping the team leader and the corporate executives over there, but they're getting rid of the middle managers who used to keep an eye on the team of 10 programmers to get the work done. They realize they're working from home. They're still getting the thing. They're getting rid of that middle management. If you remember the 90s in the banking sector, that is where the first round of the cuts to the middle management came in the banking sector in the 90s. Then it went over the other parts of the economy. So you may gain 4 jobs and you may lose 4. The net is 0, but it's the distribution that will change. That is going to be 2021 and 2022. And that is why I tell people, do not just look at the number of jobs. In my forecast, for example, in March and April, we lost close to 530,000 jobs in state of Georgia. Of that, we have recovered almost 450,000, right? Mm-hmm. The gap is only 100,000, right? 20% gap. But in terms of the quality of jobs, the gap is still 40%. So you can say, we are back. At the same time, oopsie, need to be careful. That's my message.
Well, great answer. Obviously, many moving parts. So, you know, and it's going to be an interesting year ahead. And we'd love to, we'll check in with you as we go and you know, hear what you're adjusting and what's been right, what's been wrong. And it'll be fascinating. So thank you for spending time with us today.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me. And thanks to Dennis for doing the interview. I really enjoyed it. I appreciate the opportunity. And if I don't get called back the next year, either my forecast was wrong or it was way too right.
You're too good not to be brought back next year. So thank you. We'll go ahead and put it on the calendar. But Rajeev, thank you for your time today. You did a great job.
Thank you.
And Dennis, thank you.
Mhm.